The warning lights started flashing at exactly 3 in the morning on Tuesday. Dr. Kate Sullivan jumped out of her bed when the alarm screamed through her small apartment deep under the Rocky Mountains. She had been waiting for this moment her whole life, but now that it was here, her hands shook as she put on her clothes. The red lights meant only one thing, and every person in the underground base knew what it was. They were coming back. Kate ran through the metal hallways toward the main control room. Her feet made loud sounds on the floor, but she did not care about being quiet anymore. After 300 years of waiting, the time for silence was over. Other scientists and soldiers were running too, and their faces showed the same mix of fear and excitement that Kate felt in her chest. The ancient machines that had been sleeping for decades were waking up all around them. The control room was already full of people when Kate arrived. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center looking at the big screens that covered every wall. His uniform was perfect, even though he had been called from his sleep just like everyone else. Jake had trained his whole life for this day, just like his father and grandfather before him. The Morrison family had been guarding Earth for 5 generations. The screens showed space around Earth and the solar system beyond. Green dots marked human ships and stations that everyone could see. But the red dots were what mattered now. 47 large red dots were moving toward Earth from far away in space. They were still months away, but their path was clear. The Zephyrians were keeping their promise to return. General Pete Adams walked into the room and everyone became quiet. He was an old man with white hair and scars on his face from the wars on Mars 20 years ago. But his eyes were sharp and his voice was strong when he spoke. The general had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. He looked at the screens for a long time before he said anything. The story began almost 300 years ago, when the aliens first came to Earth. Back then, humans were much simpler and their technology was basic. The Zephyrians came in huge ships and studied Earth for 6 months. They tested human weapons and found them weak. They looked at human cities and called them primitive. They spoke to human leaders and decided that humans were just smart animals who used simple tools. Dr. Lisa Harper had been there during those first meetings. She was young then and scared, but she watched everything the aliens did. She listened to every word they said and wrote down every detail she could remember. When the Zephyrians left Earth, they told the humans they would come back someday when the planet was worth taking. They said humans might be useful as workers if they learned to behave, but Dr. Harper understood something the aliens did not. She knew that humans were much more dangerous than they looked. The aliens had made a big mistake by showing humans their technology and telling them they would return. Dr. Harper spent the rest of her life studying everything the Zephyrians had left behind. She learned how their ships worked and how their weapons could be stopped. Most important, she learned how they thought and what they expected to find when they came back. The humans made a plan that would take 300 years to finish. They pretended to grow and change in ways the aliens would expect. They built cities on Mars and mining stations in the asteroid belt. They developed faster ships and better computers, but they also built secret things that the aliens would never see coming. Deep underground, they dug huge tunnels and built weapons that could destroy whole fleets. On the moon, they hid giant guns behind fake research stations. In the oceans, they built submarines that could fly to space. Lieutenant Amy Brooks stood next to Captain Morrison and watched the red dots on the screen. She carried a letter in her jacket pocket that had been passed down through her family for 5 generations. Her great-great-grandmother had been part of Dr. Harper's first team. The letter was written on old paper and the words were faded, but Amy knew every line by heart. It said that humans were not just clever animals, and someday they would prove it to the whole galaxy. The room filled with more people as the hours passed. Engineers came to check the power systems that had been sleeping for decades. Weapons experts arrived to test the guns that had never been fired. Communication officers started sending coded messages to secret bases all over the solar system. Everyone moved with purpose because they all knew their jobs. Families had been training for this day for 300 years. General Adams finally spoke to everyone in the room. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the excitement under his words. He said the time for hiding was almost over. Soon the whole galaxy would see what humans could really do when they had enough time to prepare. The aliens thought they were coming to harvest a primitive world, but they were flying into the biggest trap in history. Captain Morrison checked his watch and saw that the morning shift was starting in the cities above them. Millions of people were waking up and going to work like any other day. They did not know that the alien fleet was coming because the news would cause panic. But they were ready anyway, because every human city had been designed as a fortress. Every building could become a weapon, and every street could become a battle line. Dr. Kate Sullivan sat down at her computer and started the programs. She had been testing for 20 years. The machines around her began to hum as they powered up systems that had been waiting 3 centuries to be used. She thought about Dr. Harper and all the other scientists who had worked to make this day possible. They had all died before seeing their plan work, but their children and grandchildren were here to finish what they started. The red dots on the screen moved closer to Earth with each passing hour. The Zephyrians were coming home to collect their prize, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. Humanity had spent 300 years turning their weakness into strength and their fear into fury. The greatest predators in the galaxy were about to learn what happened when clever animals had time to think. The Zephyrian fleet moved through space like a pack of metal wolves hunting their prey. Fleet Commander Zarian stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars change as they got closer to the small yellow star that warmed the human world. He had done this same journey to dozens of other planets, and it always ended the same way. The local species would fight for a while, then surrender when they realized how hopeless their situation was. Zarian looked at the data his ships were collecting about the human solar system. Everything appeared exactly as his computers had predicted. It would. The humans had spread out from their home planet to colonize Mars and build mining stations around the asteroids. They had research bases near the giant planets and communication satellites everywhere. It was impressive progress for such a young species, but nothing that worried the fleet commander. The humans were following the same pattern that every other primitive species followed when they started exploring space. First, they would master their home planet, then move to nearby worlds, then slowly spread outward. The Zephyrians had seen it happen so many times that they could predict exactly how each species would develop. Humans were perhaps a bit faster than most, but they were still centuries behind Zephyrian technology. What Fleet Commander Zarian did not know was that every signal his ships detected had been carefully planned by humans who had been waiting 300 years for this moment. Commander Roy Bennett sat in a secret control room on Earth and watched his screens show the fake signals being sent to the alien fleet. The humans called it the Deception Protocol, and it was the biggest magic trick in history. The cities on Mars that the Zephyrians could see from space were really just empty buildings with holographic projectors inside them. The mining ships in the asteroid belt were actually remote-controlled robots that sent false signals about human technology. Even the research stations around Jupiter were fake and designed to make the aliens think humans were much weaker than they really were. Roy had spent his whole career learning how Zephyrian sensors worked. The aliens had left behind enough technology during their first visit that human scientists could study their methods for centuries. Now Roy used that knowledge to show the aliens exactly what they expected to see. The fake human civilization looked busy and growing, but also vulnerable and unprepared for war. Dr. Nina Parker worked in her laboratory deep under the city of Geneva. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, putting the final touches on humanity's secret weapon. It was not a bomb or a gun, but something much more dangerous to the Zephyrians. Dr. Parker had created a computer virus that could attack the aliens through their own cybernetic implants. The Zephyrians were not just organic beings, but part machine as well. They had computer chips in their brains that helped them think faster and control their ships better. Dr. Harper's team had discovered this weakness during the first contact 300 years ago. The aliens were so confident in their technology that they never imagined anyone could turn it against them. Dr. Parker's virus would spread through the scanning beams that the Zephyrians used to study other planets. When they tried to analyze Earth, their own technology would be infected. The virus would make their implants stop working and cut the connection between their organic brains and their ship computers. Without those connections, the aliens would be helpless. Captain Lucy Carter flew her stealth ship through the outer edges of the Zephyrian fleet. Her ship was invisible to alien sensors because its hull was made of metamaterials copied from Zephyrian technology. The aliens had accidentally given humans the tools to hide from them. Lucy's job was to plant quantum beacons on the enemy ships. That would let Earth's hidden weapons target them perfectly. Lucy had trained for this mission her whole life, but being so close to the alien ships still made her nervous. Each Zephyrian vessel was bigger than a human city and carried enough weapons to destroy whole planets. But Lucy also knew that size and weapons would not matter if the enemy could not see the attack coming. She placed her beacons carefully and moved like a ghost through space. Back on Earth, billions of humans went about their normal daily lives. They went to work and school and shopping without knowing that alien warships were getting closer every day. The government had decided not to tell people about the threat because panic would make the deception harder to maintain. But every human city was secretly ready for war. The skyscrapers in New York and London and Tokyo looked normal from outside, but inside they were really missile launchers. The subway tunnels under every major city connected to vast underground command centers. The parks and shopping malls could transform into fortresses within minutes. Every human settlement had been designed to be both a home and a weapon. Fleet Commander Zarian studied the latest reports from his scout ships and felt satisfied with what he saw. The humans had grown and learned much since his people's last visit, but they were still no threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Their weapons were primitive and their ships were slow. When the time came to attack, they would surrender quickly. Just like all the others had done, the fleet commander sent a message back to the Zephyrian homeworld reporting that the harvest of Earth would proceed on schedule. He expected to strip the planet of all useful resources and take the surviving humans as slaves within 6 months. After that, his fleet would move on to the next target on their list. It was just another routine conquest in the endless expansion of their empire. General Adams stood in the same room where human leaders had first met the Zephyrians 3 centuries ago. He looked at the old photographs on the walls showing those first terrifying encounters when humans realized they were not alone in the universe. The aliens in those pictures looked so confident and superior as they dismissed humanity as barely intelligent animals, but the general also saw newer pictures showing what humans had built during the centuries of preparation. Secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt where weapons were constructed that could bend space and time. Underground cities that could survive anything the aliens might throw at them. Fusion reactors powerful enough to light up whole solar systems. The Zephyrians were coming to harvest Earth, but they had no idea that Earth had become something completely different than what they remembered. The prey they expected to find had become the predator, and the trap was already closing around them. General Adams smiled as he watched the red dots on his screen move closer to their doom. The Zephyrian fleet settled into orbit around Earth exactly where human computers had predicted they would arrive 300 years ago. Every orbital path and every attack angle had been calculated by generations of Earth's smartest military planners. The aliens moved their ships into formation like pieces on a chessboard, but they did not know their enemy had been studying the game for centuries. Admiral Ross Turner watched from his hidden command center on the moon as the enemy fleet arranged itself around Earth. The Zephyrians were methodical and careful, just like Dr. Harper's behavioral studies had predicted they would be. They established blockade positions and deployed scanning probes and began broadcasting their standard intimidation messages to the planet below. Everything happened exactly as the human war planners had hoped it would. The lunar surface around Admiral Turner looked empty and peaceful to anyone watching from space. Rolling hills and ancient craters stretched to the horizon under the black sky. But under his feet lay the most powerful weapons ever built by human hands. Fusion cannons that could melt asteroids and gravity bombs that could crush starships. Into nothing waited for his command. Fleet Commander Zarian sent his usual surrender demand to the human government. The message was simple and had worked on dozens of other worlds. Surrender now and serve the Zephyrian Empire or be destroyed completely. Most species chose slavery over extinction, but a few tried to fight back. Those worlds became examples that other planets could learn from. President Hellenberg received the alien message in her secure bunker far beneath Washington. She had been elected specifically to handle this moment, and her response had been written and rewritten by 12 different administrations over the past century. But when the time came, she spoke from her heart. Instead of reading the prepared speech, the president's message went out on every communication channel in the solar system, but the words were not meant for the Zephyrians. They were meant for every human who had spent their life preparing for this day. She said the time for hiding was over and the moment of truth had arrived. 300 years of preparation would be tested in the next few hours. Lieutenant Chris Morgan sat at the Quantum Communications Array deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. His job was to send the most important message in human history when the president gave the word. 3 simple words would go out simultaneously to every hidden military base and secret weapon platform in the solar system. Those 3 words would end the deception that had lasted for centuries. The message came at exactly noon Earth time. Chris typed the words into his computer and watched them flash across the galaxy faster than light itself could travel. In that moment, every human installation from Mercury to Pluto received the same command: execute Operation Turnabout. The greatest military deception in history was about to be revealed. What happened next shocked the Zephyrian fleet so completely that many of their officers would later claim it was impossible. The harmless communication satellites around Earth suddenly dropped their disguises and revealed weapons that bent space and time. The research stations around Jupiter ignited fusion drives and showed themselves to be massive warships that had been hiding for decades. Dr. Parker's virus activated at the same moment across the entire enemy fleet. The scanning beams that the Zephyrians were using to study Earth carried the infection directly into their ships. Their bio-neural implants began failing one by one, and the connection between their organic minds and their computers was severed. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated suddenly became confused and helpless. Captain Ellen Foster led the first wave of humanity's real fleet as they appeared around the Zephyrian formation. These were not the slow chemical rockets that the aliens expected, but ships powered by controlled black holes and armed with weapons that could manipulate gravity itself. The human vessels moved like dancers through space while the enemy ships struggled to even turn around. Fleet Commander Zarian felt his cybernetic implants stop working, and suddenly his mind was cut off from his ship's computer systems. Around him, his bridge crew was struggling with the same problem as their enhanced abilities disappeared one by one. The fleet commander tried to give orders, but his voice communication system was not responding. His perfect warships were becoming metal coffins floating in space. The fake cities on Mars shut down their holographic projectors and revealed the massive defense platforms hidden underneath. The mining ships in the asteroid belt dropped their disguises and became attack fighters armed with singularity weapons. Every piece of human technology that the Zephyrians had been tracking turned out to be something completely different and infinitely more dangerous. Admiral Turner gave the command to fire, and the moon's hidden weapons opened up on the enemy fleet. Beams of pure energy lanced out from craters that had looked empty moments before. The lunar surface erupted with gun ports and missile launchers as 3 centuries of hidden construction was revealed in a single devastating moment. Captain Foster's ship, Retribution, tore through the Zephyrian formation like a shark among minnows. Her weapons could crush enemy vessels into black holes or tear them apart at the atomic level. The technology had been developed by studying Zephyrian science for 300 years, and then improving it beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. On Earth, the hidden defenses revealed themselves as every major city transformed into a fortress. Skyscrapers opened to reveal missile batteries and plasma cannons. Subway tunnels became launching platforms for fighters that shot up through concealed openings. Parks and plazas sprouted defense towers that had been buried just beneath the surface. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes from the first shot to the last Zephyrian surrender signal. 3 centuries of human preparation and planning had compressed into a quarter hour of the most one-sided military engagement in galactic history. The proud conquerors who had dismissed humanity as barely intelligent animals found themselves completely helpless against their former prey. Fleet Commander Zirian's flagship was one of the last to surrender, but when it did, the white flag was transmitted on every frequency. His damaged systems could still access. Around him, the remnants of his once mighty fleet were either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The species he had come to harvest had proven to be the most dangerous predator he had ever encountered. General Adams watched the final surrender signals from his command center and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because the plan had worked perfectly and Earth was safe. Sadness because so many good people had died over the centuries to make this victory possible. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Dr. Sophie Clark began studying the captured Zephyrian officers within hours of their surrender. As Earth's chief expert on alien psychology, she wanted to understand how the defeat had affected their minds. What she found surprised her. The aliens were not just beaten but completely shocked. Their entire understanding of the universe had been destroyed in 17 minutes. President Burke addressed the world from the same room where her predecessors had planned humanity's defense for 300 years. She told everyone that the immediate threat was over, but the real work was just beginning. Earth had proven it could defend itself, but now it had to decide what to do with that power. The victory celebration lasted through the night, but by morning everyone knew the truth. The captured Zephyrian databases contained information about their vast empire and the hundreds of worlds they controlled. Earth had won against a single fleet, but there were thousands more ships out there. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, and there would be consequences. The morning after humanity's victory dawned gray and quiet over Earth and the prisoner-holding facilities. Carved deep into the moon's surface, captured Zephyrian officers sat in cells designed specifically for their physiology. Fleet Commander Zarian stared at the metal walls and tried to understand how his perfect invasion had become such a complete disaster. His cybernetic implants were slowly healing, but his pride might never recover. Dr. Sophie Clark walked through the detention center, studying her alien prisoners with scientific curiosity. Each Zephyrian showed different reactions to their capture. Some were angry and demanded to speak with their superiors. Others seemed confused and kept asking how primitive humans had developed such advanced technology. But most were simply afraid, because for the first time in their lives they were powerless. The interrogation rooms were designed to be comfortable rather than threatening. Dr. Clark knew that fear and pain would only make the aliens shut down mentally. Instead, she offered them food and medical care while asking careful questions about their empire and their plans. Slowly, the Zephyrians began to talk, and what they revealed changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The Zephyrian empire was vast beyond human imagination. Over 400 star systems belonged to them, and each one had been conquered using the same methods they tried to use on Earth. They would study a target species for months or years, then return when the time was right. Most worlds surrendered without fighting. Those that resisted were destroyed as examples to others, but the empire was not just about conquest and slavery. The Zephyrians were harvesters who consumed entire civilizations. They stripped planets of every useful resource and took the surviving population to work in their factories and mines. Whole species had been wiped out to feed the endless hunger of their war machine. Earth was supposed to be just another meal. Admiral Janet Price stood in the newly constructed command center that had been built from captured Zephyrian technology. The holographic displays showed a 3-dimensional map of known space with different colored markers for each type of world. Red markers showed Zephyrian-controlled systems. Yellow markers indicated worlds currently under attack. The few green markers, representing free civilizations, looked pitifully small. Captain Morrison had been promoted to lead humanity's first deep space exploration mission. His new ship was built using human engineering enhanced with 3 centuries of studying alien technology. The vessel could travel faster than light and carried weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But more importantly, it carried a message that would echo across the galaxy. The first target was a star system called Kepler 442, where intelligence suggested a species called the Altarians was making their last stand against a Zephyrian harvesting fleet. The Altarians were peaceful crystalline beings who had never hurt anyone, but that had not saved them from the Empire's hunger. They had been fighting for 6 months, and their defeat was only days away, when human ships appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. The Zephyrian fleet commanders could not believe what their sensors were telling them. The vessels that dropped out of faster-than-light travel were clearly of human design, but that was impossible. The primitive mammals from Earth were not supposed to have interstellar capability for at least another century. Captain Morrison broadcast a simple message to both fleets before opening fire. He told the Altarians that Earth had come to help, and he told the Zephyrians that their harvesting days were over. Then humanity demonstrated for the second time what happened when a prey species learned to fight back. The battle lasted less than an hour and ended with every Zephyrian ship either destroyed or surrendering. Lieutenant Colonel Dan Murphy led the ground assault on the Zephyrian mobile command base that had been bombarding Altarian cities for months. His troops moved through the enemy facility with deadly precision using combat techniques developed specifically for fighting cybernetically enhanced aliens. The Zephyrians had never faced soldiers who knew their weaknesses so completely. The Altarians watched in amazement as human warriors did things their own people could never imagine. Where the crystalline beings were gentle and philosophical, the humans were efficient and ruthless. Every movement was calculated and every shot was perfectly aimed. The Zephyrians, who had been terrorizing their world for months, were defeated. In less than 2 hours, General Adams received reports from across the galaxy as humanity's new expeditionary forces engaged Zephyrian fleets in system after system. The strategy was simple but devastatingly effective. Humans would do to the Empire exactly what the Empire had been doing to everyone else, only faster and more efficiently. The hunters had become the hunted. Dr. Parker's virus proved to be even more effective than she had hoped. Every Zephyrian ship that encountered human forces found their cybernetic systems infected and failing. The aliens' greatest advantage became their greatest weakness as their own technology turned against them. Ship after ship was left helpless in space as their crews lost connection to their computers. The Altarian government sent a message of gratitude to Earth that brought tears to President Burke's eyes. The crystalline beings had been preparing for extinction when human ships appeared like angels of salvation. They offered to share their knowledge of crystal technology and stellar navigation in exchange for protection from future attacks. It was humanity's first alien alliance. Fleet Commander Zarian found himself in the strange position of advising his former enemies about Imperial tactics and strategy. Dr. Clark had convinced him that cooperation was his only chance of survival, and slowly he began to understand that humanity might actually be able to defeat his people's empire. The idea was terrifying, but also somehow exciting. The psychological impact of humanity's victories spread faster than their ships could travel. Word passed from system to system that the unstoppable Zephyrian Empire had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive animals. Enslaved worlds began to rebel and free civilizations started to hope that liberation might be possible. President Burke addressed the newly formed Galactic Liberation Council from the same room where humans had first learned they were not alone in the universe. Representatives from 17 different species listened as she outlined humanity's vision for the galaxy. Earth would not become a new empire, but rather a force for freedom and protection. The war against the Zephyrian Empire would last for years and cost millions of lives, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had proven that even the greatest predators could be stopped by prey that refused to give up. The galaxy was learning that Earth's children were not conquerors but guardians who remembered what it felt like to be afraid. Admiral Price looked at the star chart showing human fleets spreading across known space and smiled. Each ship carried the same message to every world it visited. No species would ever again have to spend centuries preparing for the return of monsters. Earth was coming, and the age of harvesting civilizations was ending. In his cell on the lunar detention facility, Fleet Commander Zarian wrote in his daily report to Dr. Clark. He described how his people's empire had seemed so permanent and unstoppable. But now he understood that all empires eventually faced an enemy they could not defeat. For the Zephyrians, that enemy turned out to be a species they had never taken seriously until it was too late. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy looked completely different than it had before humanity revealed itself to the stars. Admiral Janet Price stood in the bridge of her flagship Prometheus as it traveled through what had once been the heart of Zephyrian space. The star systems that had been centers of oppression and slavery were now free worlds, rebuilding their civilizations with human help and protection. The transformation had not been easy or quick. Each liberated world faced unique challenges as populations that had been enslaved for generations learned to govern themselves again. Some species had forgotten their own cultures and languages after centuries of forced labor. Others had been so damaged by Zephyrian brutality that they struggled to trust anyone, including their human liberators. Captain Morrison walked through the refugee camps on New Terra, where survivors from dozens of destroyed worlds were learning to live together. The Altarians had offered their planet as a sanctuary, and their crystal cities now housed beings from across the galaxy. Morrison watched children from different species playing together and marveled at how quickly the young could adapt to change. Dr. Sophie Clark had become humanity's chief diplomat to the liberated worlds. Her studies of Zephyrian psychology had helped her understand the trauma that enslaved populations suffered and develop ways to help them heal. She traveled from system to system, establishing counseling centers and schools where former slaves could learn the skills they needed for freedom. The Zephyrian Empire still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Most of their fleet had been destroyed or captured, and their remaining worlds were cut off from each other by human patrol ships. Some Zephyrian leaders had fled to distant galaxies, while others had surrendered and were working with human authorities to dismantle their empire peacefully. Fleet Commander Zarian had become an unlikely ally in this process. His knowledge of imperial structure and psychology proved invaluable in convincing other Zephyrian officers to surrender rather than fight hopeless battles. He worked with Dr. Clark to develop surrender protocols that allowed enemy commanders to save face while giving up their weapons and freeing their slaves. The technological revolution that followed the war changed both human and alien civilizations. Zephyrian engineering combined with human creativity produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Faster than light travel became routine, and new worlds were discovered every month. Medical advances extended lifespans and eliminated diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Lieutenant Amy Brooks commanded a patrol ship that monitored the border regions where former Zephyrian territory met unexplored space. Her job was to watch for any signs that other hostile empires might try to move into the power vacuum left by the Zephyrians. Intelligence suggested that several aggressive species were testing human resolve with small raids and probing attacks. The letter that Amy carried in her jacket pocket had become something of a legend among human forces. The words written by her ancestor during first contact had inspired generations of soldiers and scientists. But now Amy was writing her own letter to leave for her children. It spoke of humanity's new responsibility to protect the weak and defend the innocent. President Burke had been re-elected twice on a platform of galactic liberation, but she was growing tired of the endless responsibilities that came with Earth's new role. Every day brought requests for help from species under threat, and decisions about where to deploy human forces. The burden of being the galaxy's protector was heavier than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Liberation Council had grown from 17 member species to over 200 as more worlds gained their freedom. Each species brought unique skills and knowledge that strengthened the alliance. The Altarians provided crystal technology and stellar navigation. The Vortaki contributed their expertise in energy manipulation. The Nexari shared their knowledge of biological sciences. Dr. Nina Parker had established research stations throughout liberated space where human and alien scientists worked together to develop new technologies for peace rather than war. Her original virus that had defeated the Zephyrian fleet was now being modified to help heal the neurological damage that cybernetic slavery had caused in millions of beings. General Adams had retired from active duty but still served as an advisor to the Global Defense Council. He spent his days writing the official history of humanity's preparation for war and their transition to becoming galactic guardians. His memoirs would become required reading in military academies across the galaxy, the memorial on Earth that honored everyone who had died during the 3 centuries of preparation had been expanded to include the names of all species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule. Visitors from across the galaxy came to pay their respects and learn about the price of freedom. The memorial's central message was simple but powerful. Never forget and never again, Admiral Price received reports daily about new worlds asking for human protection and assistance. Some were threatened by pirates or raiders while others faced natural disasters or technological failures. Each request required careful consideration because Earth's resources were not unlimited and humanity could not save everyone. The education programs established on liberated worlds were perhaps the most important part of the reconstruction effort. Former slaves learned to read and write in their own languages again. Children who had never known anything but servitude discovered art and music and literature. Scientists who had been forced to build weapons for their oppressors could finally pursue knowledge for its own sake. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his exploration ship as it approached a previously unknown star system on the galactic rim. Long-range sensors showed signs of an advanced civilization but also detected the energy signatures of Zephyrian weapons. Another species was under attack and crying out for help. Morrison gave the order to jump to faster than light speed. The message that humanity broadcast to every corner of the galaxy was simple, but had become legendary among oppressed peoples everywhere. When monsters came to harvest your world and enslave your people, you only had to hold on long enough to send a distress signal. Earth would hear that call and ships would come. Humanity would arrive with weapons and determination and the promise that no world would face annihilation alone. The transformation from prey to predator to protector had taken humanity less than a decade, but the responsibilities would last for millennia. Earth's children spread throughout the stars not as conquerors, seeking glory, but as guardians who remembered their own fear. They carried the lesson learned during 3 centuries of preparation. The strong must protect the weak because someday everyone is weak. Fleet Commander Zarian completed his final report to the human authorities and prepared for his new assignment as an ambassador to the remaining Zephyrian worlds. His people had learned too late that the universe was not divided into predators and prey, but into those who chose cruelty and those who chose compassion. Humanity had shown the galaxy which choice led to lasting strength.